The final conclusion to part 3 was we can divide any acceleration by gravity 9.8 commas per second squared, or really by 10. Must edit. I cannot let that go. Open editor. No, I cannot let such a thing go. Must fix fighting. Type A personality. Should just let it go, but I cannot. I cannot. Perfectionist genes fighting them, but I can't let a comma where the letter M should be. And they're right next to each other on the keyboard. All right, better. It can be tough to be me, but I can't let that go. It's a comma. Okay, we're back. The final conclusion from part 3 was we divide any acceleration by gravity. 10 is close enough to get the g-force. You get a reported acceleration like 400 meters per second squared. That must be a fast car. It's like, first of all, a quickly accelerating car, not fast. And 400 meters per second squared is 40 g. You're dead. No. And divide any force given to you in newtons by gravity to get a mass equivalent. So 321 meters per second squared is the same as about 32 g's. And a force of 7 newtons is the mass equivalent of 700 grams. Those aren't animating. Must fix. No, don't. Just move on. Okay. Got past that one. Now we have Superman and Lois Lane. Lois is falling at 98 meters per second down when Superman gently catches her at a sedately 205 meters per second up. It's not bold. Continue on. Lois's speed changes to match his Superman in 0.5 seconds. Compute the force applied to Lois's spine if she has a mass of 50 kilograms. What g-force and equivalent mass is she subjected to? So she's going down at 98. He's going up at 205. We are asked to compute F equals ma, but not given a. We must calculate it first. So the parameters of the problem are this. Minus 98, 205, 0.5. We're assuming down is negative. The final speed of Lois is this. The initiating speed is that. So she's doing about 305 meters per second change in half a second, which is 610 when I round. So this. A rookie mistake would be to do 205 minus 98 because you just don't want to see that double negative. But remember, she's reversing speed. Now we can compute F equals ma. 606 meters per second squared up. We get 30,300 newtons. I'm already thinking that this 606 meters per second squared is 60 g. I have a horrid feeling that this is not going to go well for Lois. I think that 60 g hitting her in the spine, it's more like that is what's going to happen. And now what would 60 g's do to a person? Here's an aeronautical chart where they rate in the roughest way possible. Because, like, let's face 60 g applied to your heels versus 60 g applied to your neck. It's hard to say how it's going to be applied. Let's face it, Superman is not a chair. When he hits Lois, it's with like a punch. So we can look at this chart and see that a person subjected to 60 g for a duration of 0.5 seconds it lands in an area of severe injury, but I think for Lois, the way Superman would contact her, it's game over. We take that force and divide by 10, we get an equivalent mass of 3,030 kilograms put on Lois. So Superman's impact to her back would feel the same as a small Asian elephant landing on Lois. Oh, Stampy! You're such a kooky elephant. You look surprised. I'm kind of worried about Lois's arm there. So it's game over for Lois, but at least we know that Stampy doesn't have colon cancer. Now, the crumple zone is where we can combine our problems. And I'm going to show you the opening to the film Kick-Ass. But basically, this person falls 181 meters. You can watch the clip yourself because, again, I'm not going to show a YouTube video internal to a YouTube video. They filmed this sequence at the RBC Center in Toronto, and the flying wingsuit guy has a 181 meter high fall before discovering his wingsuit doesn't work and he crashes into a car. So we're going to take a look at this problem and assume that the roof of the cab crumpled by about 70 centimeters. I'm guessing that. It looks like a foot or two in the old school way, so I just took a stab at it. We could do a range. You could do a minimum. The car dented 10 centimeters and do a maximum, the height of the cab roof from the ground, and you could bracket your range, as they call it. We want to calculate the deceleration, and if the person has a mass of 85 kilograms, what braking force would they have experienced, and do a mass equivalent again. Because this is what makes the physics real. What we have to do here is break the problem into two. There's the acceleration phase when he's gaining speed, and then the deceleration phase when he hits the cab. Notice I have a typo that I have 180 meters here, but we'll see how this really doesn't make much difference into this problem. The acceleration phase from rooftop to cab, we can subtract 2 meters to account for the cab roof, but it won't change the problem very much. So I've cut the height down to 178 meters because, he stopped accelerating 2 meters, but I'm telling you, it's going to make no difference. We know he starts off at rest. We want the final speed, and there's gravity, rounded again. There's only one formula that has no time in it, this one. We get 60 meters a second. Now, what happens if I didn't subtract the height of the cab roof? It literally changed the answer by 0.01 meters per second. Now, why catch a cab when the cab can catch you? He's got 70 centimeters to start, and he's going to wind up at 0 speed, but what's his starting speed? Well, his starting speed in this problem is the ending speed from the other half. This final speed of 60 meters a second is the initial speed into the new problem. And we work it out, we get 2,571 meters per second squared. 0 is his final speed. This is about 260 G. Finally, if we go back to pure kinematics, the video clip shows a 10-second fall. Is this realistic for a 181 meter building? This is where students who can be very smart, very great with math, and they suddenly go, I don't know what to do, because there are two possibilities here. Compute how long a 181 meter fall really takes, or compute how much distance accumulates in a 10-second fall. And this is where you get stuck. So you're a really smart kid, but you just suddenly, when you're faced with a decision as opposed to, please calculate the time it takes to fall 181 meters, or how far do you fall in 10 seconds, I just changed the question to, is that realistic for a 181 meter building? And you suddenly go like, it does not compute. So you got two choices. Either one is just as easy. If we want to compute how long a 181 meter fall really takes, then we rearrange the equation, get 6 seconds. Or we say, how far would he really have fallen in 10 seconds? And we get 500 meters. Now pause and look at that for a second. let's just pretend that the time is only 5 seconds. I bet you most people, if told, they would fall 180 meters per second, and I asked them, how far would you fall in 10 seconds? They would double it to 360 meters. Instead, a measly 4 seconds added to the fall has you going from a 181 meter fall to a 500 meter fall. That is an enormous distance. It's literally triple. You haven't even doubled the time, and you've tripled the distance of the fall. Why is that? Why do most people expect doubling time doubles the distance of the fall when it will not be that simple? Because you're accelerating. If you fall for 6 seconds, your speed will be 6 times the acceleration due to gravity, 60. If you fall for 10 seconds, your speed will now be 100. We see here that a fall lasting 6 seconds would bring you almost 200 meters down in altitude, but just adding 4 more seconds, 2/3 of that original time, triples the distance you fall. Why is that? Most people, if I said you fall 180 meters in 6 seconds, would say, therefore I fall 360 in 12 seconds. But you don't. 2/3 more time and you triple the distance you fell. Because you're accelerating. Your average speed in the next 4 seconds isn't starting from rest. It's already starting from a very high velocity, and you're adding even more to it. So the ground starts coming up on you quicker and quicker and quicker. David Purley survived a crash in which his car came from 173 kilometers an hour to rest in 0.66 meters. Just from the denting. Which G-force did he survive? There are 2 conversions to do. Kilometers an hour to meters a second, and the centimeters to meters, and we get 1749 meters per second squared, which is roughly 175 G. So he survived 3 times higher of a G-force than killed the guy in Kick-Ass. But of course, the guy in the video landed on the roof of the cab with his head. This guy was in a car designed to be crashed. Another movie scene you can watch yourself, the clip on YouTube, is an Arnold Schwarzenegger's True Lies. The bad guy falls off the wing of the Hawker Harrier and is hanging from his backpack on the side of a sidewinder missile, and Arnold gets to say, "You're fired," and shoots the bad guy off on the sidewinder missile, which is not the preferential way of killing the bad guy, because he just fired a sidewinder missile in downtown Miami, and those missiles are $700,000 a piece. A bullet would have been a lot cheaper. But anyway, he gives the guy a $700,000 ride through a building in Miami. The sidewinder missile reaches Mach 2.5 within 5 seconds of launch. We want to find out the missile's acceleration in G's, and if this bad guy has a mass of 90 kilograms, what force will he feel through the strap, snagging him to the missile? What is the mass equivalent of this? I'm going to give you a little formula that we're going to use in sound. The speed of sound is approximately 331 meters per second, adding 0.6 meters per second every degree Celsius. Given that this is the Miami heat, I work it out, we get the speed of sound is 352 meters a second at the time this movie was filmed. Mach 2.5 simply means 2.5 times this number. We don't need to know the distance. What we need to know is the starting speed and the top speed of the missile. That's 880 meters a second in 5 seconds. This means the missile accelerated at 176 meters per second per second. That's only about 20 G. It's way less than the last two problems. Could this guy survive that? Well, the problem with this G-force is a human could survive it for 5 seconds if you look at that chart. But the geometry of his situation is he's hanging from his backpack. In order to make him accelerate at that rate, if he has a mass of 90 kilograms and we accelerate him at 176 meters per second squared, that's 15,840 newtons pull on him. And it is a pull because he's hanging from the strap. If we pretend this is due to gravity and say all of this came from the force of a mass in gravity, we can work backwards to find an equivalent mass of almost 1,600 kilograms on his shoulders. Once again, that's the weight of a car, like a Honda Civic. So if you could grab a human being by their backpack and accelerate them at 20 G, you are saying you could put a backpack on them and hang the weight of a car off that backpack and have the man's shoulder blades, arms, and backpack survive that. I think you'll realize what happens is the missile would simply rip the straps off the guy, or he would dislocate his shoulders and slip out of the backpack. Either way, he's not going for a ride. And the other part that movies don't take into account, the sidewinder missile itself has a mass of 80 kilograms, so the person is going to outweigh the missile. This would cut the missile's acceleration to basically half of what it was. It still winds up being 700 kilograms on your shoulders. You're not going to survive it intact. My question would be, what would the electronics in the sidewinder think of that sudden lopsided weight on the missile? It might completely lose control over itself. But it got Arnold Schwarzenegger able to say, "You're fired," and pull the trigger. Next, we're going to move into what are called free body diagrams and start adding up forces acting on something.